Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are all here tuned in for our Christleton High School webinar for parents and carers of Year 7 and Year 8 students. I'll just wait a couple of moments just to make sure everybody is joining us okay. In case you don't know, my name is Adrian Francis. I'm Assistant Head Teacher here at Christleton High School, one of several Assistant Head Teachers, and I am the host for the webinar this afternoon. But we've got quite a number of school staff and also a guest speaker who hopefully are going to give some really good information to you, but also be able to answer questions, which obviously is one of the main advantages of having something as a webinar. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We expect the webinar to last somewhere between 45 and 50 minutes, depending on the questions that we have. We do hope that we can make this recording available via our school website in due course. So if you're not able to take part for the full duration, or if you want to see any of the presentations again at a later date, then that should be possible as well. As it's a webinar, you are able to type questions in at any time, and the questions are only seen by the presenters here in school. They won't be seen by anyone else in the audience. So you can ask something reasonably confidential if you wish, pertinent to your child. But if it's a general query and we think a response would benefit a wider audience, then we will convey the information to the audience as a whole as appropriate. So what I would like to do to start with is just to introduce our two heads of year for Year 7 and Year 8. So Mrs. Monaghan and Mrs. Jones, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. I'm Jenny Monaghan. I'm the head of Year 7. I've been head of Year 7 for a long time now, so I'm sure I've encountered most of you, particularly if you've got some older students. And just want to report to parents that this year's Year 7 have settled in really, really well. We're delighted with them, particularly pleased with those cash reports, which Mrs. Roberts will be talking to you about shortly. And again, just reiteration from myself that if you've got any concerns, if you could contact Form Tutor, they will always send something through to me if they think it's important. But obviously, if you do want my input as well, then do feel free to contact me where appropriate.
So following on, I am Claire Jones. I'm head of Year 8. I started transition from last year's Year 7 in June last year. I know I've spoken to a lot of you already, obviously responding to concerns or things raised about your children, but also at the recent Year 8 9 information evening. It was nice to see so many of you there and to see you in person. We're really pleased with the Year 8 cash reports in general as well, and you'll be getting more information on that, as Miss Monaghan's just said. I'd also encourage you to stay tuned for DC Keevan's presentation. He recently did an assembly to Year 8 on social media, which I think we all agree is a recurring theme in causing issues. And he is going to give parents some tips and share some of the strategies that he shared with students as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Jen and Claire. So the format of the webinar, basically there are three main parts to this event. In a moment, my colleague Nia Roberts, Assistant Head Teacher, will be talking about cash reports, our cash reporting framework, and how to interpret your child's cash reports, which were issued in the last week or so. Then we've got Mrs. Harding, Rachel Harding, also Assistant Head Teacher. She will be talking about mental well-being and resilience. And then we are delighted we have a guest with us this evening, DC Andrew Kevin, who is going to be talking about keeping safe online. And as Claire just mentioned to us, he did a brilliant assembly to a couple of different year groups in the school earlier on this year. So much so we felt that what he had to say would be a real benefit to parents as well. So before I hand over to Nia and cash reports, I just wanted to give a quick update about our Parents app, which we very much hope will be launched in the next half term, certainly this month. As you may well be aware, we have changed our school, what we call MIS, our Management Information System. For many, many years, we were with a system called SIMS, and we have moved to a company called EdGen, as a partner school, and they are able to produce us with a much more bespoke system, which should be a lot more powerful. It is taking time to build it up. It has meant that because we've moved away from SIMS, we've had the loss of EduLink, which some of you may well be familiar with if you have older children in the school. But we're hoping that the parental app will have the functionality of most of what EduLink was able to do, but also some additional features as well. Some questions we have asked is, how do I best check my child's homework? And as I'm sure you know, all homework now should be set on Google Classroom. If you haven't already done so, please ask your child for their login and their password for Google Classroom. That then allows you to see what homework has been set, when it's due, all of the materials associated with the homework which have been posted as well. So please do take that opportunity if you've not already done so. Okay, right, so we're going to move on to our first main part of the webinar this afternoon, and I'm delighted to hand over to Nia Roberts, who is going to talk about our cash reporting framework and how to interpret your child's cash report. So over to you, Nia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Francis. And I'm just going to share my screen. So bear with me a moment. Okay, so thank you so much to all of you for joining this afternoon. It's absolutely fantastic to see so many of you have been able to join us. Now, the main aim of this part of the session really is just to think about and to help you interpret your child's report, and to also steer you in the direction of where you can find support to help your child at home in terms of their progress and their learning. So this part of the webinar is going to last for about 10 minutes. And as Mr. Francis said, if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the messages and we can respond at the end of the webinar. Or if they're more individual, then we can get back to you individually. So I wanted to start just by thinking about our curriculum at Crystleton, because we're really proud of the fact that all students here study a broad and balanced curriculum. And our curriculum vision, if you like, is that we are aiming to support all students to develop into happy, hardworking and caring people who aspire to be the best that they can be and ensure their aspirations are brought to life. Now, in terms of how we do that, we have looked really carefully at our curriculum and made sure that we brought the 5 C's, our school ethos, right to the very heart of everything that we do. We've also spent a really long time ensuring that our curriculum is geared up to ensure all students accumulate the required knowledge and skills that they need for future success, whether that be external examinations or life beyond Crystleton, whilst also developing the right attitude to learning and those all-important metacognitive learning habits. So that's ensuring that they are building up to be resilient, reflective and resourceful, so that, again, life beyond Crystleton, they can be lifelong learners and they can enjoy learning and can be resilient in their endeavours after their time here. And so the cash, so knowledge, attitude, skills and habits come together to form our assessment framework. And this allows us really to be able to monitor and report to you about your child's progress in these 4 areas. So every year, as parents, you'll receive 3 updates in relation to cash. 1 will be in the form of a parents' evening and 2 are in the form of reports, one of which you've just received. And as it says there on the screen, the primary aim of that report is to give you that all-important update and a snapshot of your child's progress in their knowledge, attitudes, skills and learning and habits across all of their subjects. So what I want to do now is start to have a look at some examples of cash reports and just talk you through about key things to note and just a couple of reminders as well. So as you can see on the screen here is an example of a child's report. Now, one thing that you might notice if you've got a child who's in another year group is the immediate change in the colour that we use for working towards. The working towards grading used to be a red, but we've listened to student and staff and parent feedback, and that working towards colour is now yellow. But the great thing about the colours is that it means you can quickly and easily see the areas of strength for your child, like where they're doing really well, where they can be praised and celebrated, and where they may need additional support or extra help in getting them to where they need to be. So the colours are all important for that. You can also see that for each of the subjects, we have a grading for knowledge, attitudes, skills, and habits. And those gradings range from working towards, expected, above, and outstanding. You will also notice that the starting points are on there just to remind you as to your child's starting points. And I know that you've had communication about starting points already this year, or a reminder of what they are, but I just thought it'd be beneficial just to share again the process behind the identification of student starting points. Because if you recall, a starting point identifies where your child is starting on their learning journey. It simply allows us to be able to measure the progress that your child makes since they've started at Chrisselton. Rather than focus on target and attainment, it's about how much progress your child has made. So the starting points are decided using a number of different factors. We have not only used Key Stage 2 data, that's SAT data or information from primary schools. We also look at the mid-year baseline assessment data, and also the work that your child completed up to about October time in Year 7. So all those contributing factors come together, and members of staff decide upon the right starting point for your child. And then, the gradings and knowledge and skills are measured relative to that. But I'll talk a little bit more about knowledge and skills in a moment. You'll also notice that there are some subjects where students aren't identified with a starting point. And this is because in some of our more practical and creative subjects, to accommodate for the fact that we have many students coming from many different backgrounds in primary schools, we allow them a year before we assign them a starting point in those individual subject areas. And so for that reason, some subjects only report on ASH, attitudes, skills, and habits. A very common question that I get asked, was given this question last year and throughout the year as well, is in relation to when starting points are reviewed. Now, starting points are reviewed formally at the end of each academic year, and it's a very rigorous process. We're always looking to ensure that students are on the right starting point for their ability and how they've performed over the year. So starting after Easter time, we begin to look at how your child's performed and prepare to formalise a starting point for the next academic year. So we're constantly reviewing and ensuring that your child is on the right pathway. As I said before, these reports are very much a snapshot in time. So whereas your child may be expected or above in a particular area, in a particular subject at this report, on the next report, that might not be the case, and that's relative to the work that's being covered in that particular period of time. So there's many contributing factors that just help a member of staff decide upon your child's report. It's never based on just one piece of work. It's always a multitude of different things that come together. So now what I want to do is have a look at knowledge and skills specifically. So I've got an example of a report here, just a random anonymous report that we have created. And as you can see, I'm going to focus on knowledge and skills. Now, knowledge is very much the subject knowledge that your child is required to be able to remember, to learn, to recall, and to retrieve. In terms of subject-specific skills, it varies from subject to subject. On the whole, it's the application of knowledge, but in different subjects, for example, geography, there may be map skills as well. So there are general skills, and there are also the subject-specific skills as well. Now, you can see that where we have got starting points, knowledge and skills are reported relative to that starting point. So you can see for this child's report, for English, they were a higher starting point. For knowledge, they are expected, they're making expected progress for their starting point. They are where we need them to be. And for skills in English as well. For ICT, where this child is intermediate, then they are above for knowledge and expected for skills. But if we look at maths, the child has a higher starting point, but they're struggling to meet expected progress in knowledge and skills. And that's why they've got the working towards indicated with the yellow. Now, in terms of how to support children in moving out of working towards, Class teachers here at Christleton will always use quality first teaching strategies. So you may find that your child has been given an additional resources in lesson that's slightly more scaffolded to be able to help them access the materials. You might find that your child has been given an additional intervention task or has been invited to come to a particular session. So there's lots of different things that happen to ensure that we're helping your child move out of working towards into expected. But additionally, you might find yourself at home thinking, well, I'd really like to support my child in making a little bit more progress, particularly in maths for this child. And now I want to show you how you can do that. So I'm just going to go through to our school website now, because on our school website, there we go, you can look under the curriculum tab and look at subjects. And if I scroll down, so go to maths, and if I scroll down to the bottom of the page, we've got here many assessment grids that have been created for years 7, 8 and 9. And these are designed to break down what's expected for your child in each subject area and to really gear and steer the knowledge and skills that they need to be able to accumulate and to demonstrate. So if I go to year 7 spring term 1, you can see that on this assessment grid, it details for every starting point what your child needs to be able to demonstrate in terms of knowledge and skills. And this is all for expected in the middle. And so that means that in the example I just showed you where the student was higher and they were working towards, it means they were struggling to be able to demonstrate all these areas in the expected column. So these assessment grids on the school website are super useful. Please use them, and we try and ensure that as many students in lessons are kind of directed towards these and make use of them when they have their assessments returned to them. And I'm going to speak a little bit more later in terms of assessment and feedback and reflection that takes place in lessons. So that's very much knowledge and skills and how you can interpret the report, what it means, and how you can find additional support. Now having a look at attitudes. Now, attitudes and habits are more of a holistic picture by class teachers. They're not measured relative to starting points. And attitudes and habits, again, have the same gradings of working towards, expected, above, and outstanding. And if you look at this child's report on the screen, again, anonymous and randomly created reports, we have got here attitudes. And you can see that in art, this child is struggling to make expected progress. So they're working towards for their art, they're expected for design and technology and attitude. So that's fantastic. They're doing exactly what we need them to do. English, they're above. And sometimes you will even see a blue outstanding as well for all areas, in fact. Now, in terms of what attitudes means, well, attitudes is focusing on students very much, as you'll see on the poster behind me, attitudes very much is about students being ready to learn. And you can see on the screen here, we've got the poster in a little bit more detail. We're expecting students for their attitude to be prepared for learning, ready to learn. And this means that they are punctual, engaged, equipped, and respectful. So whereas on the report I showed you before, if the child in art was working towards, it may be they need to self-reflect and think, okay, I have been late to my lesson, or I haven't always listened when I needed to, or I've maybe forgotten some of my my equipment in the past. So this is what we look for in terms of expected attitudes, and we look for students to do these things independently. That is being punctual, engaged, equipped, and respectful. And an awful lot of work has gone on in school over the past year to help students to understand what we mean by attitudes and being prepared for learning. And that's where you've maybe seen the introduction of golden tickets, also the perfect week emails that maybe some of you have received, all about ensuring that students understand what we're looking for and really celebrating the success for those students who are prepared for learning. Now having a look at learning habits. And again, learning habits is another area which follows the same cash gradings of working towards, expected, above, and outstanding, but it's not measured relative to a starting point. And learning habits, if you like, is the metacognitive element of cash. It's about developing that resilience in our learners so they can be lifelong happy learners in everything that they go on to do. Now, looking at this report, again, you can see this child is And for their English, they have an intermediate starting point. They're doing really well on their knowledge. They're meeting expected progress in their skills, but for their attitudes and their habits, they're outstanding. So really, praise these reds and the blues on the report, because they really are where students are doing exactly what we want them to do. We really want to celebrate that. But as you can see on this child's report, for RE, religious education, for habits, this child has a working towards for their grading. And again, it's kind of just breaking down at what are we exactly looking for a child to be expected? What does that look like? And again, I've got a little poster here on the screen that I'm just going to share with you to hopefully break that down a little bit more. Habits, as we describe to students, is about them becoming a better learner. And because we recognise that this is something that a lot of students really struggle to become a better learner, it's quite a hard concept for students sometimes to break down. So we expect students with direction to do these things. So in lessons, when there is a reflection activity, we want students to engage with that. So it's with direction. We want students to be resourceful, to demonstrate resilience, adapting well to adversity, to be reflective in their work and their activities, and to, when presented with tasks that are problem-solving tasks, to engage with those problem-solving activities. So habits is very much doing things with direction to take into account the fact that we know that students struggle with this. So for the student who maybe is working towards for habit, it may be that they need to demonstrate a greater amount of resourcefulness in their work, or when they have reflection activities in class, to engage with those and to really think about and to really note down those key areas that they need to work on. In terms of learning habits, like supporting your child at home in terms of learning habits, there's a really fantastic resource on our school website, which I'll just pull up on here for you. It's just under the Parents tab, and I can send the link out as we send the recording for this webinar out as well. But there's a guide here, and it's got loads of resources that can be used and implemented with your child, either in school or at home, in terms of how they can revise. So it's got strategies such as retrieval practice, spacing, interleaving, dual coding. These are all things that we encourage students to try out here in school, but it's useful, I know, as a parent to have these strategies and to be able to find these things at home to help and support your child. I've already touched on this already, but the use of on the introduction of the golden ticket has really helped us to be able to encourage students to understand what we mean by attitudes and habits, and to really celebrate and reward those students who've demonstrated or even have shown progress in these areas, who maybe have struggled before to be resilient and then now have really stepped up and to made an effort to improve. This is my penultimate slide before I hand over. So this slide, really, I just wanted to show you a glimpse of some of the things that are taking place in school, because I really would encourage you to speak to your child about the report and also about the reflection that takes place in school. Every time your student completes or your child completes an assessment, when they are presented with that assessment back, there's a lot of work that takes place in terms of reflection. You can see here just an example from InDT. There's a specific food and there's a booklet that students complete to track and monitor their own progress across the areas of cash. They have personal trackers that are used in DT as well. I've got an example here on the right hand side in history. So it looks different in individual subject areas, but staff are encouraging and helping your child to be able to reflect on their progress and to be able to understand what it means to be expected and how they can move forward. You've got an example here at the bottom as well of what it looks like in the maths department. They've got a specific cash tracker. So across all subjects, this is taking place. So it's great to see this happening, and it's really nice to speak to students about their reports and that they can take pride and they can easily see the success that they're experiencing and where they're making progress. So my final slide here before I hand back to Mr. Francis, and this is kind of just to reiterate again some of the things that Claire and Jenny mentioned. And, you know, if you've got specific questions about your child's progress, their cash outcomes or their starting point in a particular subject area, please contact their subject teacher, or if you feel the need, to contact the relevant head of department. If you've got questions about your child report across multiple subjects, In the first instance, please contact your child's form tutor, or as Jenny mentioned, speak to the head of year as well. If you have any general cash questions today, then please post them in the comments, and at the end we'll try our best to be able to answer as many of them as possible. So I'll stop sharing my screen now, and thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand back to Mr. Francis. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nia. That was really clear and informative. Thank you. I will just refer to a couple of questions we've had in now. So thank you for people who are posting questions up. So we have had a question, is there anywhere where we can access cash reports online? Well, we do plan to make the next cash report available electronically, which will be emailed out. And the second cash report of each academic year will also have the first set of scores on. So you can see for every subject and for all of the 4 areas of cash, how they've changed between the first and second report cycles. So yes, they will be available electronically, which I know is many people's preferred method of receiving them. We've also had a question about whether the cash reporting system continues throughout the school. Well, it does. It continues right the way up to year 11. And if your child continues into the 6th form in year 12 and 13, cash continues as well. Obviously, once your child begins their GCSEs or their BTEC courses in year 10 and 11, they will have the equivalent GCSE or BTEC grade on the report. And if they carry on into the 6th form, obviously they'll have the equivalent A-level grade or whichever course they're doing in 6th form. So it is something which is embedded right away in the school from year 7 through to year 13, which is why we felt it was so important to make things as clear as possible at the start of the learning journey in year 7. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on that, Nia, or whether that is all okay.
No, you've answered. I was going to. I put my hand up to answer, but yeah, you've answered those ones. In terms of the cash framework across the school, absolutely. When students get to Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5, it's the GCSE or A-level equivalent gradings. But the fantastic thing actually is that for attitudes and habits, those key expectations stay the same. So, attitudes in terms of being prepared for learning, and then for habits, students becoming a better learner. So that's the consistency across the curriculum with regards to attitudes and habits.
Right, thank you, Nia. Just another question that's just come in. How many cash reports do students receive in a year?
So they receive 2 paper reports, which are going to obviously paper or electronically emailed, and then 1 report, but that comes in like a verbal feedback in terms of a parents' evening. So 1 parents' evening and 2 reports.
Fantastic. Right, please do keep the questions coming. And before I hand over to our next presenter, I'd just like to say that the questions are really useful. The whole idea of the webinar is designed to be interactive, so please do keep them coming. Right, so thank you, Nia. We're now coming over to our next section, which is my colleague, Assistant Head Teacher Rachel Harding, who is going to give an overview of mental well-being and resilience. So really important area, which I'm sure we'd all like to hear more about. So Rachel, over to you.
Hello, good evening, everybody. As Mr. Francis said, my role in school is I'm the designated safeguarding lead, and one of my responsibilities is also mental well-being. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Okay, so you should be able to see an information poster that looks at our child's resilience. And I thought it was quite an interesting picture, this, of really looking at kind of the things that we might look for in a child and how resilient they might actually be. So I was asking myself the question of perhaps about my own child as well, and looking at the various different things. So looking at things like self-motivation, being able to learn from failure, being able to seek help from others and manage difficult situations calmly, and find alternative solutions and be open to new experiences. Now, obviously, sometimes things don't always go as we hope they will do. And we've noticed in school a rise in students expressing feelings of anxiety, particularly after COVID. There's been a number of kind of things that have happened that have, obviously it's affected students and their mental well-being. But the great thing is that resilience can actually be learned and really helps to manage those feelings of kind of stress and those feelings of anxiety. It doesn't obviously mean that children won't experience difficulties or any distress, but it's a way of managing that situation for them. So just having a look at this now, what I wanted to do is go through some tips for building resilience in children and teens. So the first two really are considered to be hugely important. So if you look at the first one, it's about making connections. Now, it was Children's Mental Health Week started the 6th of February, and I've just done a run of assemblies for all our students around this theme. And it's really important that our students, our young people, have those social connections. So that's their friends, their groups, that online community that they have access to, and sort of developing a strong family network. The second one is about helping your child by having them help others, and that's really about volunteering. And although that might not always be easy, it's got to be age appropriate and so on. It does empower our young people, and even just sort of helping a younger sibling or, you know, doing something for someone else can actually give them that empowerment. The third one is maintaining a daily routine. This is obviously comforting, and it's highlighting a time when there is time for work and time for play, and also, though, being flexible around times of distress. It's important that our young people know when to take a break as well. And as adults, we can help them by challenging unrealistic thinking. So maybe playing out that worst case scenario, but actually thinking about, you know, how we might manage that situation. As parents, it's important that we're aware of what our children are exposed to so that we can actually support them with those issues that they're facing. I think it's important we teach self-care as well. So that's about, you know, regular eating, what they're eating, their exercise, their sleep routines are really important. And I know with sort of online technology, that can become quite a challenge for parents. And, you know, it is important to have those conversations and get those routines around bedtime really, really good. It's about also having that fun, isn't it? And that ability to deal with stressful situations much, much better. Setting goals is also important for our young people, and that's something we often do in school, you know, setting sort of small chunks of things that they can achieve, making them feel good about themselves. Focusing on the task and actually developing that resilience is really important, and something that obviously resonates with what my colleague Nia was talking about, that we try and aim for, you know, within our school situation with the tasks that we might do. Looking at nurturing a positive self-view is really important. Thinking about handling things that go wrong, hardships in the past, how we've dealt with that, and being able to see that way forward, being optimistic and having a positive outlook. Keeping things in perspective is important. Looking for opportunities for self-discovery. So in the tough times, that's when we kind of often learn the most about ourselves. So it's about having those conversations with our young people. You know, what's happened to us obviously, you know, makes us, doesn't it? And it's a good teaching and learning opportunity for that. And finally, accepting that change happens. So change is a part of life. New goals will have to replace perhaps the old goals that we've made. And it's knowing what's going well with our children and also helping them to make a plan of action for anything that is perhaps not going so well. And this kind of stuff is really important in actually reducing those anxieties and helping our young people to kind of manage themselves well, both in their normal sort of everyday life, but also in school. But obviously we recognise that, you know, there can at times be things that are overwhelming, and it is important that at those times that there is that support for our young people. So one of the things that I wanted to just share with you is something that we have posted around school. We have this sort of tagline, which is "Don't face it alone." And you'll see right in the middle there is a question about struggling with your mental health. But there are lots of other things. I said to you before that, you know, my role is safeguarding, and it's also looking at, you know, if they're worried about something that's happening online, if they have any concerns about a friend, if there's any bullying or if there's any abuse that they're aware of, if someone is making them feel uncomfortable, if there's any sort of sexual harassment or any issues like that, it's important that your children come and get help. And there are people in school that they can get support from. We usually say form tutor first of all, or head of year, but we do have a safeguarding team. And I'm just going to share also a slide with you that we've got a place in school called a Hive. And the two people that you can see on screen there are Mrs. Rose and Mrs. Rackham. Mrs. Rose is a deputy safeguarding lead, but also pastoral support. And Mrs. Rackham is our wellbeing coordinator. And they are two non-teaching support staff who our students can go to ask for support and to report anything that they are concerned around. And of course, we would always encourage you to speak to your young people and to come and get that support. And, you know, if you have any worries, then you can obviously contact myself or one of the support staff to enable you to do that. If it's something that you're concerned about around bullying or something like that, it might be that you contact the head of year initially. Okay, so that's all I really want to share today. And so I'll pass back to Mr. Francis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hardy. That was really really helpful, and yes, I'm sure everyone will really appreciate the overview you've given there. So thanks very much for that. Right, we've got lots of questions coming in, so thank you for those. If you do click on the questions section, you can see some of the answers which have been put up. Some are public, some are private, depending on the nature of the questions there. One question that we have had, which I think it might be helpful to most people to know the answer with, is the question about parents' evenings and whether parents' evenings are planned to be face-to-face or online parents' evenings. We did a big survey of parents. We've done a couple of big surveys with parents over the last couple of years or so. We moved to online parents' evenings during the time of COVID, and then we surveyed parents about how they felt about online parents' evenings compared to coming in and doing face-to-face meetings. Whichever we do, the appointments are restricted to 5 minutes because that's the way of maximising the number of appointment slots that can be made available. If the appointments are face-to-face, quite a lot of parents, in fact, the vast majority of parents have said it extends the evening. They've got to drive into school, find a parking space, spend the evening going around from room to room. The vast majority of parents, when surveyed, have said they actually prefer the convenience of the online parents' evenings because they can access them from work, from home. It's a lot more flexibility. It's more eco-friendly. It's not travelling into school. So at the moment, our plan is to stick with the online parents' evenings. As I say, the length of time is exactly the same, 5 minutes. And certainly it was the parental preference from the last couple of surveys that we did. However, views may change. If you do have strong views on that, then do let us know. Okay, right, so we are now going to hand over to our third and final main session. And as I said earlier, really, really delighted that we've got DC Andrew Kevin, who is going to present to us on keeping safe online. Some of what you're going to hear has already been heard by a couple of year groups in assemblies, and we felt it was so important that parents heard some of this as well. So, Andrew, if you're there, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. I'll just share my screen with you. Okay, so my name is Andy Kevin. I'm a detective with Cheshire Police, and I'm currently posted with the cybercrime team. And one of my roles within the team is to go around high schools across Cheshire to deliver online safety messaging for children right across from year 6 upwards, really. And I'm not going to go through their presentation with you this evening, but the idea of this particular presentation is out of the children's presentation. When I go through it with them, they find some areas quite interesting, quite shocking, and the feedback to me as a detective is, well, why didn't we know this information beforehand? And so I felt it was really important to take those bits out of their presentation and share those with you. The main presentation for the children is all around a case study. And just to give you a little bit of a backdrop with myself, I joined the cybercrime team 12 months ago. Over the 7 years prior to that, I was a detective within the sex offender management unit based over on the west of the county. And this particular case study that I go through with the children is a case study that I investigated, and I use this as a method of going through the training for them because they really quite enjoy the aspect of the investigation, so it engages them right from the get-go. Lloyd was a boy that I managed in the community as a registered sex offender, and he came to me at the age of 14. And one of my main drivers is my own son is now 13, and he's getting right into this age bracket now. And what I was seeing as a registered sex offender manager was the children, the boys that were coming through to me, and I say boys because the female sex offenders are dealt with by a different team. The boys that were coming through to me were getting younger and younger and younger, mainly driven by what they've got access to on the internet. So that's the case study we look at with the children. And as has already been indicated to you, I've been to the school already and spoken to some year groups within Christleton, and again they found the case study a really good method of getting that message across. So I'm going to pick out the bits that the children find the most interesting, and when I speak to parents, they're the ones that they find quite shocking. So the very first thing that we need to consider is our own. Oh right, okay, just bear with me for a second. We've got a slight technical glitch apparently. Hopefully you can see that young man on your screen. Perfect. Okay, I'll just go back one slide. This is the case study that we do with children. It looks at Lloyd and his friends and how they became online bullies and how their case ended up in court for online bullying and indecent images of children. Now, one of the fascinating sides of this whole case and cases like it is the cognitive bias and how we use our internal heuristics to formulate our decision making when it comes to all things online. And this particular aspect of online bullying and indecent images and all the problems that we have with social media, the children find quite fascinating that it is actually an internal bias sort of thing. And when I explain it to them, I talk to them about bias-driven attitudes and bias-driven actions that they take in everyday life. So I give them some examples that when they jump into the car with their parents, they may put a seatbelt on because they know that's the safest thing to do. When they cross the road, they will look both left and right because they know that's the safest thing to do. When they've come to school in the morning, their parents may have locked the front door because they don't want people going into the house, or they may have had a really interesting, healthy breakfast because they know that is a good way to start the day. Those attitudes and those behaviors are bias driven because we don't even think about doing them. They're just automatic. But we've had generations and generations of people, our grandparents, our parents, and the children themselves are now starting to learn those behaviors that are keeping themselves safe because we've had years and years and years of practice and information come down through the generations. The problem with online stuff is that the mobile phones that our children are walking around with are less than 15 years old in some cases. And so we've had a very short time to get used to the online harms and problems with that. And this is a good example to use. It was just over 200 years ago the motor car was first invented. And we would never, as a member of a family, throw a set of car keys at a 10 or 11-year-old and say to them, have a little go driving the car. You may kill one or two people or smash into a few trees, but you will get the hang of it in the end. And yet we throw a really powerful computer at them at the same age and just expect them to be able to negotiate social media without any formal training. If you think about the 200 years that we've had a chance to use those cars, we've introduced since those days. When the car first started to move, the Red Flag Locomotive Act of 1865 was introduced because people were terrified that the car could move more than 2 miles an hour. So they used to have somebody walking in front of the vehicle with a flag to say this vehicle is moving. And over those 200 years, we've had a chance to get used to the fact that the cars are getting faster. So we've introduced roads and pavements and all of the smart motorways and so on. We've got age limits and driving licenses and everything else. And yet, after 200 years, we're still killing people on the roads. So we still haven't got to grips with driving cars. And so how we haven't had much chance to get used to using mobile phones either. And this was something that struck me when I was driving to the airport last year. My son said to me, Dad, what happens if the plane crashes? And I said to him, well, we're probably all going to get killed if that happens, son. And he went into a state, oh, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. And I said, look, don't worry about the plane crashing. We've got, we'll go on holiday, we're going to have a great time, we'll come back and we'll talk about this holiday for years to come. However, where we live in North Wales, we drive along the M56 to the airport. And to get there, that M56 motorway is quite a busy and dangerous motorway to be on. And we're more likely to have been involved in an accident or get hurt on that motorway going to the airport than we ever would on that aeroplane. But my boys don't perceive the risk of being in the car, even though that's the most riskiest thing they'll probably ever do, is because they are in the car all of the time. Every day, Dad, take me here. I may as well have Dad's taxi written on top of the car. We're taking them all over the place. They're in and out of the car all the time. They don't perceive the risk. And this is exactly the same mindset, the same bias we have with our mobile phone. It was Mark Twain who told us that familiarity breeds contempt. And the reason we hold truth in such respect is because we have so little opportunity to get familiar with it. When you went and bought your £300 or £400 smartphone, how many of you then booked yourself onto a 12-month training course on how to keep yourself safe on there? I'm sure a lot of you probably didn't, and you probably haven't had your children go on a training course either, and yet our children are walking around with a really, really powerful computer that gives them access to the whole world without any formal training of how to keep themselves safe. Cybercrime is the #1 crime type in the UK. Your children are more likely to get themselves into bother online than any other aspect of their lives, and we need to get a grip of what's going on. If I was to say to you tonight, come on guys, let's all go to the cinema together and we're going to go and watch a film, but the film's got abusive and threatening language in there, it's got extreme violence, pornography, images of self-harm, it's got images of child nudity, coercive and controlling behaviours, misogyny and racist and homophobic views, you'd be thinking to yourself, oh, this is going to be a bit of a tough watch, and I would expect it to be at least an 18 on the certificate. And yet all of those aspects of that movie are free and open to anybody who's got access to social media and the internet. And we're exposing our children without giving it a second thought to all of those topic areas. And this is where the children start to really drill down and start to ask me lots and lots of questions when we look at the games, the rules of the game. And the rules of the game are so important for children and parents to understand. And children will say to me, oh, but it's my right to use the internet. I've got a right. It's not a right, it is a privilege. And that privilege has been given to them by the person who pays for the contract on their mobile phone. And that's the starting point of it. Who owns the mobile phone? The children in their heads believe that they do, but actually it's the person who actually pays the contract. When a job comes into us and we're investigating, the first thing we do is look to see who owns the phone. And that person becomes our #1 suspect. And generally it's a grandparent or a parent of the person who owns the phone when it's a child. And a lot of families don't think that far through. So in Lloyd's case, for example, the example is used that Lloyd's father was the person who was my #1 suspect for uploading and distributing indecent images of children, because that's what his son was doing. And the IMEI number ownership of the device was in his father's name. So we need to understand that everything, well, the children now do when I speak to them, that everything they look at, every site they go on, every message they send is done in the name of the person on that contract. And then we also look at social media companies and what they actually store and save about ourselves. And what children don't realize is a lot of the intelligence that comes to us as police officers come from the social media companies themselves. Social media companies store everything. If there's anybody online at the moment who uses things like WhatsApp or TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, your social media companies know more about you than you know about you. And I'll show you how that works in a second. Is social media free? Well, it's free at the point of access, but nothing's free in this world. And what we need to understand is that these companies are making trillions of pounds a year, but they're not charging their customers at the front end to use their platforms. Well, how do they make those trillions of pounds a year? Well, they're doing that because they're buying and selling and trading in your data, not just your data as the owner of the contract, but the data your children are generating. And it's highly addictive, the algorithms that they use, but they are harvesting data. And then the children are fascinated by this idea of an age limit on social media. Currently, there is no age limit on social media. It's a myth. Some platforms say, oh, the guidance is 13 on this platform or 16 on this platform. Those age limits have got absolutely nothing to do with child protection or anything to do with content. It's all to do with civil litigation in America. In America, social media companies are not allowed to store data on anybody under the age of 13. So if you've got a 12 or 11-year-old who's online, and social media companies know that they've got millions of people younger than 12 online, but they are not allowed to store any data on them, but they store data on all of their users. So to negate the fact that parents can't sue them, they put in their terms and conditions, we don't want anybody on our platform under the age of 12, or under 13, or under 16. It's all to do with civil litigation. It's got nothing to do with content and nothing to do with child protection. So we need to understand that. And when do I become legally responsible? Well, the children are given the message that they need to realise that they are legally responsible for their own actions from the age of 10. And we talk about indecent images of children, and a lot of children think that indecent images are of children of the age between 14, sometimes I'm told, or 16. It's actually under 18. So any image of a child which is either naked or in their underwear in sexual poses, they are classified as indecent images, and that's people of 17 years and below. One of the other big areas that we need to understand is our digital footprint, and it's keeping their children's future bright. Because there's so much information that social media companies are storing and keeping on our children that may come back and bite them a little bit later on. And I showed them some graphic examples of that. So if you've got a mobile phone with you at the moment, and a mobile phone is the one on the left here, then you're in the minority. Most people will have the one on the right there, which is actually a very powerful computer. And if you go to the keypad on your computer as if you're going to dial somebody, and you type in there *#06#, then that will show you the IMEI number of your computer. It's the IMEI number that connects to the internet, and all the data is connected to that device all comes from the IMEI number. So for example, if you subscribe to WhatsApp know what time your phone goes into rest mode at night, because it monitors your IMEI number. It knows what time your phone reactivates in the morning, so it knows what time you're sleeping. It's got a hotspot on your address, so it knows where you live. As soon as you leave your address, it monitors where you go. It knows where you work. It knows the route you take to the gym. It knows everything about you. Your social media companies know more about you than you know about you. And the children find this absolutely fascinating that social media companies are doing that. And all of the data that they are typing on their social media platforms, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or Twitter, it doesn't matter. That data is all collected and stored. And I showed them some of these graphic examples here. Jack Maynard was on IMLS Celebrity Get Me Out of Here. He was taken off the program. Ellie Darby was a social influencer, and James Arthur was on a television program, X Factor. These are some people whose social media platforms, they deleted the information, then it came back to haunt them, and they lost their careers over it. Or their careers took a big serious hit because of tweets and what have you that they put up years ago, which they deleted, and it came back to haunt them. And then I showed them, to give some context, these are just two ordinary guys who put some stuff on Twitter as well, who then deleted their posts because they knew they'd been daft. When it came back to haunt them, and they both ended up in prison. What happens with our data is it's collected and stored. And social media scraping is a known thing which happens all of the time. And when your children are applying to HR departments in companies for jobs, then the HR companies will do exactly the same thing. And what I mean by social media scraping is this.
What's the name? What's the name?
Alex.
Okay, Johnny.
If you like a crystal thread, we give you a free hot tea and get a free pastry.
Your Facebook page. Phone numbers. Email address.
Okay, Carly, are you ready? Yeah.
Just pick up a second. Yeah, got it. Damien, age 26, I think, instructor.
Oh, do you remember?
Rosie goes to UCL, Martin goes to South Thames College, assistant psychologist at Great Ormond Street.
No, I'm Christian as well.
Oh, yeah, we know everything about you, Martin. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Anna from Russia.
The most important thing that we need to recognize from that particular video is that there's no special police tactics used in that. This is literally just somebody sat outside a coffee shop with somebody's name and they're doing a Google search on them and looking at their social media platforms and what information they are leaking, and without even considering the ramifications of it later on in their lives. And it's so important that we constantly look after our children and make sure we monitor and know exactly what they're up to online. One of the biggest things that happens when I go to execute a warrant at someone's address is the parents always say to me the same thing: I didn't know what they were doing. Well, unfortunately, if you're paying for that contract, we should know what they're doing. And if they're on sites like this, then we need to be even more cautious. Omegle, Discord, and Telegram are one of the three of the worst sites that we see coming up time and time again in the paedophile unit. And these sites are used by social groomers to access our children. They are free platforms. Children go on here to chat to people who they don't even know, and a lot of children are getting groomed in Cheshire on these sites. And just recently, I keep in contact with the paedophile units all the time, and this one is a new one that's come to our attention. Quite a few jobs coming just recently on this site, where this site Wink has been used, and this is basically a dating site for children. You left and right swipe on photographs that you like, and then you end up sharing images and photographs with people you don't even know. And the biggest message with all of this is we need to protect and look after our children to make sure that we know what sites they're on. Jack was a classic example. The most common sites that you will see pornography is Twitter and TikTok and Instagram. They're the first three that most children will come across pornography for the first time. All social media platforms are full of it. And the statistics tell us, when they look at the data, that it's from year 7 plus is the age where people start to first come across pornography on those sites. Jack was a classic example. When he came through to me as a sex offender, and I was talking to Jack about his past and what happened and how he ended up where he ended up. And he said to me that he first saw pornography on his mobile phone when he was 10, and that made him actually physically sick. But it kept coming back onto his mobile phone, because that's the way the algorithms work. Once you start to look at something, it will pull you in and drag you down and keep feeding you the information it thinks it wants you to look at, and he couldn't stop it. And when I said to him, well, why didn't you show your parents or get some help from somebody? He said, oh yeah, if I had shown my mum and my dad that I had porn on my phone at 10 years old, they would take my phone off me, which would have been even worse than what was coming on the screen. And he can remember sitting on his bed crying and screaming at his phone saying, please make it stop. And clearly he can't battle with the algorithms. When I first joined the sex offender management units, and children were coming through to me, young adults, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, were telling me this about how much porn there was around. I actually thought, is it really this bad? Are we really sexualizing our children? So I did a basic Google search, and I put into Google boys school uniform. And this is what you get back. You get exactly what you expect to see. Boys in school uniforms, packs of shirts for £10 or whatever, and so on. But you just change one word in that Google search and put girl in, and you get this. We are sexualizing our children right from the get-go. This is supposed to be one of the safest search engines on the internet, and yet it's still, and this is a filtered view, and we're still getting images like this. And the Internet Watch Foundation supports us in this narrative. In 2019, they did a recent research on 22,500 self-generated images. These are photographs of children who have been in their own bathrooms or in their own bedrooms, stood in front of their mirrors and taken photographs of themselves, either in their underwear, masturbating or naked, and then uploaded them onto social media. And of those 22,500 images in 2019, 85% of them were taken by girls between the ages of 11 and 13. We move forward now to the present day. There's been 1,000% increase in images going on, and the age of the girls now has moved down to between 7 and 10 years old. This has got to stop, and we need to support our children. If we don't know who we're talking to, we don't know who we're talking to.
Okay, Mum.
Girls are increasingly being groomed by adults to create sexually explicit images and videos.
And it's not just girls, it's boys as well. And it's not just adults on children, it's peer on peer, which is where we're seeing our biggest growth within indecent images as well at the moment. Schools right across Cheshire. Well, it's a worldwide phenomenon, peer on peer, which is where Lloyd's case comes in. That's a child bullying children within his own school for indecent images of his peers. This is another classic case that we investigated in January 2022. A lad from Nottingham called Robert Davies, and he infected children's computers by taking over the webcam that's on the top of the laptop. On the top of people's laptops, you have a little camera at the top there, and he was activating those cameras without the children even knowing what he was talking to them in chat rooms. And he was doing exactly the same as Lloyd. He was pretending to be boys, he was pretending to be girls, he was pretending to be adults, and he didn't matter who he spoke to. This guy 20 years ago would have been walking around houses and estates looking in people's through windows, and we would have called him a peeping Tom. These days they haven't got to leave home to do that, they just activate the camera. So you shouldn't have any exposed cameras in anybody's bedrooms, particularly if children have got laptops in there. You need to be really, really careful about cases like that. There is some new legislation which just come out to try and help girls and boys to support them, make offences that we didn't have any specific legislation for before now available to us. So upskirting and down blousing and deep fakes are 3 brand new standalone offences which we can now prosecute for. There's a huge explosion of boys who think it's okay and appropriate to take photographs underneath girls' skirts in schools or down their blouses and then post them on social media, and deepfakes is using somebody's face off their social media profiles and putting it onto pornography and distributing it. These now standalone offences carry a 2-year tariff, which is fantastic, and it supports us greatly in this area. And the Computer Misuse Act is breached all of the time, and children think this is quite funny. Section 1 of this act is where somebody is using somebody's computer without their permission. It's as simple as that. So children on their games like Xbox or whatever, they'll be online, they'll jump onto their mate's account because they know their passwords. And just by jumping onto their account, it could be a school account, it could be in work, or it could be anywhere. If you're using somebody else's computer equipment without their permission and you gain access using their passwords, then that's a Section 1 offence straight away. If you then use their account to send an abusive text message or an email to a member of staff or to another person, then you've committed a Section 2 offence, and now we're going to court. So children will do this all the time, think it's funny, and it just isn't. We do recognise there's a huge amount of mental health around this issue, and fear of missing out is one of the biggest issues. This is where people cannot literally leave their home without their mobile phone. We would never have unplugged the house phone 20 years ago and walked around with it in our bags, and yet everybody walks around with a mobile phone these days. So it's just happened in those 20 years since these mobile phones have been out. The technology has gone through the roof. We've not kept our knowledge with it, and that gap is the bit that's being exploited by social media companies. Gaming addiction is recognised by the World Health Organization, and it is a major issue. You try turning an Xbox on somebody who's in the middle of a game, and you'll get quite a reaction. And we need to be supporting our children regards to that. And our biggest message with all of this is when I talk to the children, is they must not bottle it up. If they are suffering they're talking to somebody who've asked them for things that they shouldn't be asking for, or whether they're talking to somebody and they're getting abusive messages, then they need to reach out. And we talk about parents, people in school, and what have you. It is a holistic thing, and it's a triangle between law enforcement, home, and school, and we can all work together to support our children. There is a fantastic resource for parents called internetmatters.org. If you have a child who is on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok and you're not quite sure how those platforms work, and you want to go onto those platforms to lock down the security measures within there to stop them, people who they don't know contacting them, or to reduce the amount of data the companies are collecting on them, then that's the place to go. Internetmatters.org, they've got a great social media page on there, but there's loads of other stuff on there too. And there was a young lady, when I first started my research into the subject area, called Trisha Prabhu. She's on TED Talks and she's all over the internet, and her application is called Rethink. It's free. You can get it off Google Play Store, and that downloads a keypad onto the child's mobile phone. And when they start typing on the keypad, instead of the message going straight out to the person, if they type anything offensive on there, they'll get a little message on the screen saying, "Are you sure you want to send this?" 93% of the messages that are typed on there, where the child is given a bit of a nudge to rethink the message that they're typing, then don't get sent. It's quite phenomenal, the difference it makes. So it's just another way of being able to protect your child's online activities. Now, I know quite a lot of that information there, it was skewed against indecent images, but it is a massive phenomenon in schools at the moment across the whole of the UK, which needs to be supported with children. There is a huge load of cognitive bias and a lot of around things like the Las Vegas effect and what have you, which I talk to children about why they behave the way they do, because they're risk takers in adolescent brain. I go through all that with them during the children's presentation, which isn't in this bit tonight because I haven't got the time. But if there are any questions and you need any support, then please get in touch with the school or get back to myself, and the school know how to get hold of me. Thanks so much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Andy. Really, really helpful there. Am I back on screen? Hello, am I presenting? I'm not quite sure. Oh, I am, right. Apologies. Right, Andy, that was really great. And I think what's so helpful about that is to hear from the police force about their views of things. And I know when it was delivered to the couple of year groups who saw it earlier this term, it was really powerful, and the students are still talking about all of the ramifications. So thank you so much for that. That was really helpful. Again, if there's any particular questions, do pop them in the chat. And we have had a question which I know Mrs. Harding is keen to answer about resilient workshops. So Rachel, if I can just hand back to you to briefly answer that question.
Yes, somebody asked whether there was any resilience workshops and sort of buddy mentoring. So I didn't mention that in our school we do have a school counsellor. There is a waiting list, obviously, but you know, if you feel that your child needs that additional support, that is something that we can refer on to. She also does do some kind of workshops with our students. So it's usually small group, and it's usually if there are particular needs. So yes, there have been some in sort of small group resilience, particularly around things like exams or, you know, anxiety for year 7. They have done those workshops before. There is also a mentoring scheme that happens with year 7 students. So some of the older students do that, and that's usually the heads of year usually decide if a student needs support, then they will go into that mentoring scheme. We have plans for sort of development of some of those things as well as we kind of move forward with our sort of mental health plans. The other thing that I did notice on one of the questions was about the online safety support. And I think, Andy, you probably kind of come in on this one as well, is that I think it's really important that we do talk to our young people about what they're doing online. I think the advice really from me would be that is the most powerful thing, because obviously there are things you can do, you know, technology wise to kind of, so you know what's happening. But I think it's opening those conversations and chatting to your young people about what they're doing and what they're looking at, I think is really important. Andy, I don't know whether you want to come in on that one as well.
Yeah, the Pandora's box has already opened with regard to social media. It would be ridiculous for me to sit here and say, you know, your children shouldn't be online and shouldn't be on social media platforms, because that's just not the reality. But what we can do is exactly what you've just said there. And internetmatters.org is a great place to sit down and say, look, I am providing you with the privilege of going online. And there are going to have to be some boundaries, because there's a lot of people out there who want to cause you harm. And exactly the same way we put that seatbelt on, exactly the same way we show them how to cross the road. It's a message that's going to take generations to go down the line. But the internetmatters.org is a great website. You can sit down together with your child and their mobile phone and say, if you're going to use TikTok, then these are the changes to your profile that we're going to make to try and make that platform as safe as possible for you. And for them to not feel like Jack did, that he couldn't reach out to somebody with the fear of their phone being taken off them if they come across something which is unpleasant. It really is being able to have that open and honest conversation with your children. We cannot be naive as parents to believe that our 12 or 13-year-old is not seeing pornography online. Every single platform that if they use social media is awash. It's like the Wild West out there, and we cannot bury our head in the sand as parents and say they're not going to come across it, or they're not going to come across people bullying them or saying horrible things to them. We have to support them of how to manage that. And the worst thing we can do is to shout at them or to create a barrier, because then they will just not tell us. And that's where it all starts to go horribly wrong. We've got to keep that communication open.
Thank you, Andy. That is really good advice, and thank you, Rachel. Right, that is just about the end of our webinar. So before we finish, just a couple of things. Down at the bottom of the screen, you might notice next to the Q&A icon there's something called polls. I've just launched the polls section a few minutes ago. There's literally 2 questions there asking you for feedback about the webinar and whether your questions have been answered. If there is anything that's not been answered, or there's anything else you would like to know, please do type that into the Q&A button. But if you could just click on the answers to those 2 questions in the polls, that would be much appreciated. So just to finish off, I would like to say a big thank you to all of our presenters this evening, to Nia, to Rachel, to Claire, to Jen, and in particular to Andy for coming along this evening and giving such an informative and really useful presentation. So thank you very much. And also to parents and carers. If it wasn't for you tuning in and asking the questions, we wouldn't have the webinar. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope it's been useful. Please do fill in the poll. I'm sorry we've overrun slightly, but I hope you'll agree there's been a lot of useful information there. And yeah, have a lovely evening, and see you all soon. Okay, thanks very much. Bye now.